And gentlemen, welcome to our biology class, and in this biology class I'm just going to explain on lipids. So when you talk about lipids are just macromolecules, just like we discussed about carbohydrate, and also as we discussed about proteins and many other macromolecule that we can talk about. So let's quickly look at what these lipids are and what you're supposed to know. So lipids are just a group of natural occurring esters of fat acid and alcohols. So when you talk of an ester is just a compound that is made up of an acid and also an alcohol. So generally, when you talk of lipids are just esters, and these esters are made up of fat acids and also alcohol. An example of an alcohol which you can find in one of the lipids, you can talk about the glycerol. So glycerol is one of the alcohol that you have to take note of. We'll go much in detail about this when we discuss the triglycerides. So this is an example of lipids, because lipids, they play a major role in many cell components. One good example of a cell component you can talk about is the cell membrane. So this picture is just illustrating the cell membrane. If you look carefully, there is the head there and the tail. Sorry, there is the head and another head there, and then if you observe carefully, there is that string there, which is simply the tail. So this is the graphical picture of the cell membrane. Remember, the cell membrane is made up of a lipid bilayer. So this is how easily it can be illustrated. So these lipids are very essential, and in one component where you can find the lipids are just in the structural support. Specifically, you can talk about the cell membrane. These same lipids can also be used in the storage of energy, and that will be explained later on. Okay, so when you talk of lipids, you need to understand that lipids make up 30% of our body. So 30% of our body, it is made up of lipids, and 60% of our brain is made up of also the same lipids. And these lipids, like in the brain, they'll act as a source of energy in a case whereby, let's say, glycerol, let's say the carbohydrates are not present. So when the carbohydrates are not present, you find that the lipids are normally used as a source of energy. They also hold our cells together. So if you talk about holding the cells together, you can simply talk about the cell membrane. There is a communication between the cell membrane and also another cell membrane of another cell. So these same lipids, they help in terms of communication. So when you talk of communication, you can give example of hormones. So if you look at lipids, they also act as what? Steroid hormones. So those hormones, they help in the communication. With that being said, we can move on and look further. So lipids, like I have said, lipids are made up of what? Are made up of fat acids. So these fat acids are normally acids. Okay, these fat acids are normally acids, and this glycerol, it is what? It is just an alcohol. this is just an alcohol. That's why the addition of fat acid and glycerol, they can form a lipid. So this is a lipid, they can form a lipid, and in this case this lipid is also said to be an ester. Okay, so this simply means that there is a bond between the alcohol, the alcohol and the acid, and this bond, it is the one you are able to see here. Okay, so there is this bond, there is that bond, and there is that bond, and this bond you are seeing here is known as an ester bond, is known as an ester bond. It is a type of a covalent bond. It is a type of covalent bond. So the bond which is formed between the alcohol and the glycerol to form the lipids, which are also known as esters, it is an ester bond, and this bond is normally called the covalent bond. Then during the formation of a lipid, there is the production of water, and this water which has been produced make this reaction to be called a what? A condensation reaction. So this is the type of reaction which is this is the type of reaction which normally takes place in the formation of the lipid, which is just an ester. But remember, an ester bond is what? Is a covalent bond. Okay, with this being said, let's quickly look at examples of lipids. So there are various types of lipids in our body. For example, I already mentioned the phospholipids. I've also mentioned the triglyceride. So the first example, on the examples of lipids, we can talk about fats. We can talk about fats. These fats, they can exist as a solid or a liquid. And then we also have waxes. We can also talk about the fat soluble vitamins. So we have vitamin A, vitamin B, D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. These are known as the fat soluble vitamin, and all of these, they are simply what? Lipids, and you should make sure that you know them by heart. Make sure that you know them by heart. Then we have glycerides. An example of a glyceride, it is just a triglyceride. So an example of a glyceride is just a triglyceride. Then we have phospholipids. So phospholipids, which are the most abundant, these are the most abundant, they are the most abundant lipids in the cell. They are the most abundant lipids in a cell. So when you talk of a lipid which is most abundant in the cell, it is just the what? The phospholipid. And these phospholipids can be found in the cell membrane. They can be found in the cell membrane. Okay. Another one you can talk about are the steroids. So these steroids, it simply means that these guys, they act as what? Hormones. We have steroid hormones. So steroid hormone, these act as hormones, and them being acting as hormone, that simply means that they act as what? Messengers. They act as messengers. So some lipids, they act as messengers. So these are the examples of lipids that you are supposed to know, and my encouragement is to know specifically the vitamins. What type of vitamin is fat soluble vitamin? So those are very, very important vitamins that you need to take note of. Yeah. And these, normally these vitamins, they are found in vegetables like cabbage. It contains some vitamins in it, and that is the reason why it is not really advisable to overcook food. because when you overcook food, what you're going to discover is that the vitamin might be destroyed, and once the vitamins are being destroyed, then in as much as you can enjoy that meal, in the actual sense you are gaining nothing because all the nutrients have been destroyed. Okay, so with this being explained, before I allow you people to ask questions, let me explain one important aspect of lipids. So lipids are insoluble in water. Lipids are insoluble in water. This simply means that they are hydrophobic. Okay, they are hydrophobic, and these lipids, they are hydrophobic, and they are able to form what we call the mesols. They are able to form what we call the mesols. So when you put a lipid in water, they are not going to dissolve in water, but what they are going to do is they are going to form a mesol in that particular water. And these lipids can be extracted from organic can be extracted from a cell using organic solvents. The reason why they are able to be extracted from the cell through organic solvents, it's because they dissolve in organic solvents. So they dissolve in organic solvents. So these are important points you need to make sure that you are able to know. The same points I'm writing down, not everything is being written. An example of an organic solvent you can talk about is ether. You can talk about chloroform. You can also talk about benzene. These organic solvents I've mentioned, you are going to learn more about them in organic chemistry. So your tutor in organic chemistry will simply explain more about what benzene is, what chloroform is, and what ether is. But your job in biology is to know that lipids are insoluble in water, and they can dissolve in organic solvents such as ether, chloroform, and also benzene. So this is what I was talking about when you talk about lipids. When you say lipids are insoluble in water, so this is cooking oil, this is cooking oil, and this cooking oil is not dissolving in water. So if you experiment this in your kitchen, try to put cooking oil in water, you're going to discover that it won't dissolve in water, but it's just going to be floating on top of water. In our lower grades, they told us that these guys, they don't dissolve in water because they have lecitins, but that is totally wrong, because the fact is that the reason why they are not dissolving in water because they have hydrophobic heads. I think I'll go much in detail when I talk about lipid. So they have hydrophobic tail. So they have hydrophobic tail. So the tail is hydrophobic, whereas the head is hydrophilic. So the tail is hydrophobic, whereas the tail is what is hydrophilic. So with that being said, that simply means that the heads are the one which are facing the water. The heads are the one which are facing the water. So there are some heads which are invisible in this picture, and these heads are normally facing the water. Then the tails, they are normally shining away from water. Then the solid thing which these guys form, a cluster-like thing which they form, because of this property, it is what we call a mesial. Now, with this being explained, I would allow you guys to be able to ask questions if there are any questions before I move on. Any question? Nelson, do you have a question?
No, sir, I'm very clear with it.
All right. Taonga, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Right, that's great. Okay, if no one has a question, we can move on and look at something else. Okay, I think they are capable of dissolving in organic solvents. I think that has already been explained. I've already explained that particular part. Let's quickly move on and look at why are all lipids insoluble in water? Why are all lipids insoluble in water? Can someone try? What do you think make these lipids not being able to dissolve in water? Anyone to give it a try?
It is because the heads which are facing the water are hydrophobic.
Okay, that's a nice try, but the head being hydrophobic and then it's facing water, then your statement is not adding up. It's not adding up. If something is hydrophobic, it has to run away from water, and that's the tail. So it's the tail which is hydrophobic, and then the head is hydrophilic. Okay, I hope you have heard that. So let's quickly think and understand why is it that the lipids are insoluble in water. So most lipids are non-polar. Okay, that simply means that they don't have a charge or are only slightly polar with very few charge area. Okay, then one thing you need to understand is that water mixes with hydrophilic compound by sticking to their charge groups. Since lipids lack the charges, they lack the charge group, the water molecule have nothing to stick to and don't mix with them. So this is the reason why the lipids are insoluble in water. Okay, so with this explanation, we can move on and look at the functions of lipids. What's the function of a lipid? I am appealing to everyone to make sure that you know all these functions of lipids. Number one, the lipids have the main biological function, and this main biological function includes the following. One, they act as energy storage. During fasting, for you guys who go for fasting, it can be at church or it can be personal fasting, which is a good thing. When you fast, let's say for 2-3 days, okay, the carbohydrate will finish. So once the carbohydrates are done, the body or the cells of the body will have no other option apart from using the fats, which will be converted to an energy form. You learn more about this conversion when you go much in details in biochemistry. I think you can check up some biochemistry lecture on my YouTube channel. Then they work in cell signaling. Then they also give structural support of a cell membrane. Then they act as heat and electrical insulators, like for animals that stay in places which are very cold, or even you yourself, when it is very hot Why is it that you don't faint, you don't sweat much? Lipids, they play a role in that. They play a role in buoyance, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is floating for some animals and also the cells. Then they are waterproofing, mostly this is for animals. And then the production of metabolic water and also protection of internal organs. So I'll go a bit in anatomy for the last point, protection of internal organs, like the heart. Okay, the heart is an internal organ. So the heart is surrounded by a pericardium, which is a cavity, and around the same heart there are some fats you can find, and these fats, they are just there to protect the heart. Even the blood vessels around them, there's some fats. That's why it's very important to have a balanced diet, to exercise, and to follow health tips. Not whereby you're just eating anything, not checking up your body weight, not doing exercise. That's why you find that most people who don't do that, they end up to have some problems with the internal organs because the fats have accumulated. Even under the skin, immediately you cut the topmost part, you can find the yellow stuffs, which are just simply the fats. So the fats are almost everywhere in the human being. Okay, so these are the 8 functions of fats, and each of them should be known. Okay, so for those with questions, you are free to ask now.
Sir, for me it's not a question. On the functions of lipids.
Yeah.
You say lipids act as hormones.
Yes, lipids act as hormones. That's where there is signaling. This signaling is representing what? Hormones. Okay, the signaling is representing hormones, so they act as hormones. Okay, we can move on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We can move on and look at fat acids.
I didn't get in the part.
Where? Taonga, you said something? Okay.
Well, why all lipids are insoluble in water?
Okay, why all lipids are insoluble in water? So the question is that, the answer is that the lipids do not have charges. Those are some of the responses you gave. Do not have charges. Do not have charges. 1. And then 2, you can say they have hydrophobic. They have hydrophobic tail, which has a long chain of hydrocarbon, hydrocarbons. Okay, so you can give those reasons, or in case of MCQ, those are the reasons you need to expect. Okay, with that being said, I can move on. I don't know if you have a question, Taonga. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we can look at fat acids, then I'll call it a day. So, and then we'll continue with part 2 next time we meet. So fat acids, these are normally acids, and this is the structure of fat acids. They have a polar head, so this is normally a polar head. Okay, this is a polar head, and this side it is the what? It is the hydrocarbon chain. This is just the hydrocarbon chain. So fat acids have a polar head, and also they have a hydrocarbon chain. So basically, if you look at this same fat acid, like I have said, they have the polar head, and this polar head, it is known as the what? Carboxyl group. So this is a carboxyl group, and the carboxyl group is the one that make the fat acid to be polar. Okay, they are the one that make them to be slightly polar or interactive. Then the hydrocarbon chain, it is this chain which is remaining here, and this chain, it is insoluble in water. So this is the basic structure of fat acids. They have a carboxyl group which is polar, and the hydrocarbon chain. It is this same fat acid which will react with an alcohol to produce a lipid. So in short, fat acids are not lipids. So a fat acid is made up of the hydrocarbon chain that terminate with a carboxylic group, and this is just the formula of a fat acid. Please make sure that you know the formula of a fat acid. Then this makes the fat acid molecule amphipathic. So a fat acid molecule is normally amphipathic. Sometimes they won't put fat acid, but they'll use lipids. Okay, so lipids or fat acids are normally amphipathic, meaning that it has a polar head, which is hydrophilic head. I've already explained that, and a non-polar tail, which is the hydrophobic. I think this has already been explained. So this is how a fat acid is. So it has a polar head and also the hydrophobic head, of which we know that fat acid are of two types. We have a saturated fat acid and the unsaturated fat acid. So when this fat acid react with an alcohol, like from here, okay, from here like that, this component is for the fat acid, but for all this molecule, this is a phospholipid, but we are not going to look at that today. So amphipathic is just a word which is used to describe a chemical compound which has both polar, which meaning it is water loving or water soluble, and a non-polar, which is not water soluble portion in the structure. This simply means that it is both hydrophobic and the hydrophilic compound. Now we have classification of fat acids. So fat acids are being classified into two groups due to the presence or absence of a double bond. So fat acids are classified into two groups, whereby one, we have the saturated fat acid, two, we have the unsaturated fatty acid. So these are the two groups of fat acids. So for now, I'm going to end here. The next time we meet, I will continue and finish up the whole topic of fat acid. So in the meantime, those with questions, you are free to ask now. But for those who are going to have questions later on after watching the class again, you are free to WhatsApp me and I'll be able to respond. For now, have a blessed day.